Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.28. Ittang sharat vrishikavratu harer vishrunvato men savang yashomalam sankirtimanam munipir mahatmapir bhaktiv pravrittatma rajastamopaha. Translation. Thus, during two seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great-souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of the Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Transcendental loving service for the Supreme Lord is the natural inclination of every living being. The instinct is dormant in everyone, but due to the association of material nature, modes of passion and ignorance cover this from time immemorial. If by the grace of the Lord and the great soul devotees of the Lord, a living being becomes fortunate enough to associate with the unadulterated devotees of the Lord and gets a chance to hear the unadulterated glories of the Lord, certainly the flow of devotional service takes place like the flow of a river. As the river flows on till she reaches the sea, similarly pure devotional service flows by the association of pure devotees till it reaches the ultimate goal, namely transcendental love of God. Such a flow of devotional service cannot stop. On the contrary, it increases more and more without limitation. The flow of devotional service is so potent that any onlooker also becomes liberated from the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance. These two qualities of nature are thus removed, and the living being is liberated, being situated in his original position. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thus, during two seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great-souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of the Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished. Okay. So Narada Muni is continuing his description of his elevation in the association of devotees. So we've heard about how he heard about Krishna, and then he realized that his own gross and subtle body are external to his real self, because he by proximity to Krishna, we can see what's real and what's less real, what's temporary, what's an assumed identity. But the process of bhakti doesn't end there. And this is one of the points that's brought up in this verse, is that even after transcendental knowledge enters into our consciousness, that we're aware that we're not the body, there is actually much more to go. So Narada Muni, he engaged in hearing very seriously and for a significant period of time. He didn't always have the association, face to face with these devotees. He had it for 2 months, and then they left. 2 seasons, so that's like 4 months. There's 6 seasons in the Indian calendar, each 2 months long, so 4 months. And then they left, and then he continued. Well, he continued on his own without them, but that intensive period of hearing and chanting was only 4 months long, But the point is, it was a deep dive, and so there's a way in which we can think like, actually, I've made it. I've made significant advancement, and in a way that's true. Realizing we're not the body is significant advancement. It's a very significant thing when somebody realizes that the body's a machine, and the mind is just full of constructs, and it's external to an actual spiritual self. And still, there's more to go. And Narada Muni was able to experience the full liberation from the modes of passion and ignorance by concentrated hearing. So there's a way in which, by hearing in association of devotees, um, one can experience a temporary experience of liberation, right? One can experience, at least for some time, that I'm not my body, that there is a supreme person. I think we all experience this in Bhagavatam class. I know I do. There's this, the sincere experience of hearing actually gives us liberation. In fact, there's a verse in the Bhagavatam later that says, whatever anxieties and tribulations the living entities are experiencing, they're able to be freed from them, at least while they're hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. And um, that's part of the process, is to keep coming back to these core practices, because ultimately it is our birthright, it is our nature to be like that all the time, not just in the Bhagavatam class, not just in our best round of japa that day or that week, where we're like at our most Krishna conscious. These experiences are giving us glimpses of our actual nature and our potential, moment to moment. Real spirituality isn't a thing for Sunday or this day or that day or the holiday or Janmashtami, or like it's the self. It's the self experiencing itself and the supreme self all the time. And that's a very deep thing. And as we heard in our japa affirmations earlier, we're repairing our broken relationship, right? And a broken relationship means that there's, in our case, so much in the way of obstacles, so much infidelity and avoidance and bad habits and lies and distraction that's gotten in the way of our pure relationship with Krishna. So it's not like, he's punishing us for any of that, and he's just trying to keep us under his thumb. There's a very practical way in which there's work to be done to get out from under the grasp of these lower inclinations, lower tendencies, the grip of the mind. In short, the effects of rajas and tamas, passion and ignorance. And in order to be truly freed from them for good, takes intensive hearing. It takes intensive hearing. You have to sit and you have to be present and you have to give your attention and you have to have intention for a long time. And that's why our process is the way it is. Because if you can't do that, if you can't sit for 4 months with saintly persons in the middle of the rainy season in India, at least do it every day. But try to lean into it every day. His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, you don't have to be a great devotee. You just have to be a good devotee. It's not necessary to believe like I have to become some kind of saint. That's not really what you need to think. You just have to be a good devotee. But what does a good devotee mean? A good devotee means somebody who chants good japa, somebody who does the fundamentals well. When you're there, when you have the privilege of engaging in these core processes, hearing and chanting, lean into it. That's not optional. You can be a rank and file devotee. You can have no profile in the movement. That's not necessary. You can be a good devotee and not like a saint. You don't have to be the next Srila Prabhupada, but you do have to chant sincere japa. You do have to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam regularly. You have to lean into that, and for however long you can. And that sincerity and that intensity of purpose is actually irreplaceable. And Narada Muni had that. And he had that in the association of unadulterated devotees. This is a beautiful word, unadulterated, right? It's there in the verse. These great souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories. So the glories of the Lord are unadulterated. And also in the purport, if a living being becomes fortunate enough to associate with the unadulterated devotees and gets a chance to hear the unadulterated glories, so the devotees also are unadulterated. The word unadulterated means unsullied, untainted, not mixed or diluted with any different or extra elements, having no inferior substances, pure, complete, and absolute. So this speaks to our real nature. Our real nature is that we're devotees. That's who we are. We see the Lord, we see our relationship, and we act accordingly. That's pure, that's unmixed. It's only by any extraneous mixture that there's like another inclination. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, pure devotional service is described, and also, because it's our nature, and also mixed devotional service is described, which is really how you get to pure devotional service. People don't just start practicing pure devotional service from a conditioned state. They start practicing devotional service mixed with other things. And so there's this experience of like, I'm practicing bhakti and I'm distracted. And that can be like, well, I'm chanting my japa and I'm thinking about some adjustment to my material condition, right? Or I'm going with my sincere bhakti practice, but I also have material desires. And that's just the way it is for the conditioned soul. There's mixed devotional service, but mixed devotional service means there's pure devotional service mixed with other things. And so if you have in a cup, you have pure nectar, divine nectar, and you water it down, you still have divine nectar in there. You just got to get rid of the stuff that's inferior. And the good news is, between the divine nectar of bhakti and all the inferior things that we're attached to because of rajas and tamas, bhakti is eternal and all attractive, and all the other stuff is, not so much. So our practice means trusting that and finding those souls, asking for those souls who have that, who are already in the platform of being in touch with their nature and being naturally motivated to hear and chant. At first we hear and chant because we hear it's a good idea, and then while we're doing it, we're like, okay, there's something in this, great, but we're not spontaneously in love with Krishna. We're not like going about our day all the time thinking like, I really wish I was in kirtan. I mean, if we're fortunate, we sometimes feel like that. Like ever have like a really good kirtan, like my dad came to the temple the other day, and there was like a raging kirtan for an hour and a half because my guru was there, and he led this incredible kirtan program. And we all had, he mentioned too, like we had the Maha Mantra stuck in our head afterwards, because that's a very advanced devotee chanting from the bottom of his heart. And so for a good few hours, like we all felt like we were floating, and that's wonderful. And then other things start to come in, right? So that's because we're not at the level of spontaneous devotional service. When you're at the level of spontaneous devotional service, you're always floating. You're always not just floating. Floating means you feel free from the lower modes of nature. That's a wonderful thing. But when spontaneous devotional service is there, you're always eager for Krishna. You're always seeing him. You can't wait to share him with other people. You're actually tasting him all the time. So there are people who would have this. People like the devotee I brought to my dad to listen to. People like Srila Prabhupada, many of his followers. And these are the unadulterated devotees of the Lord, devotees who are experiencing spontaneous love for Krishna. No one has to tell them to wake up and chant. They're like, I can't wait, right? It's like Srila Prabhupada said, I consider sleep like death. It's such a waste of my time. He was always eager. In fact, I talked to one of his servants in Vrindavan once, and the servant did a lot of personal service for Srila Prabhupada, but also a lot of, he mainly did actually service in distributing books in a big time way. And when Srila Prabhupada was around him, this devotee would very eagerly take the privilege of being around Srila Prabhupada as much as possible, including and especially being there when Srila Prabhupada woke up from his afternoon nap. And he told me that because I asked him for any reflections he had on Srila Prabhupada. And he said, I would always try to be there to wake him up for his nap, or when he would wake up, even though it wasn't my service. I would practically elbow my godbrothers out of the way to take the service because it was so amazing Every single time, he said, every single time that he woke up, I was there with him in Hawaii, he said, he would wake up from his nap and he's there apparently sleeping, like we all are, we experience sleeping, and he would open his eyes. But when you were in the room, you walk in the room and you could feel there was something amazing going on. Like there was just some atmosphere there. And he would open his eyes and without any gap, he would begin preaching. He would say, therefore, Prahlad Maharaj is saying over and over again how natural bhakti is and how foolish we are to turn away from Krishna. And it was like whatever he was experiencing in his heart, in his sleep, was obviously with Krishna. And then he's coming out into Mahaprabhu's Leela of sharing Krishna. There was no gap, right? Srila Prabhupada is somebody who would rest like for 2-3 hours a day. And the rest of his time, he was like burning the candle at both ends to give us this Bhagavatam purports to travel around the world. This is amazing. This is an incredible level of Krishna consciousness. So when we have people who are receiving that flow and have taken it very seriously, we want to hear from them, you know? And when we're hearing these purports, we're also doing that. We're receiving Prabhupada's ecstasies. He stayed up all night to give us these things. Instead of sleeping, he wrote these purports. And that's what we're receiving. If we receive it in that mood, we get infected with that enthusiasm and we can start to feel like we're floating above rajas and tamas, passion and ignorance. So this purport, this verse is about hearing intensively from those persons for a long time. So we get freed and our devotional service starts to become spontaneous. Prabhupada likens it to the flow of a river. You can't tell a river to stop. You can't dam it up. It's a force of nature. It just keeps going without limitation and without stoppage, without interruption, and without any other purpose, without any other inferior motivation. Just like bhakti can have another motivation. Like I like bhakti because I feel good. I like bhakti because I get praise from my classes. I like bhakti because I'm free from suffering. I like bhakti because there's transcendental knowledge. And those are all fine, but um, ultimately, bhakti for its own sake, right? Just like in a relationship, we're capable of love for its own sake, not for anything back. So we're building ourselves toward that. And as long as it's not there, we have work to do, which means we should honestly and soberly understand that we should continue with the process of hearing and understand what the steps are. That's why there are these descriptions of the very, very precise ladders of the rungs of the ladder, the steps of bhakti. And we should also not beat ourselves up because that's par for the course. That's what it's like to be a conditioned soul. Narada Muni didn't know anything. He was a 5-year-old boy, but he became a pure devotee. If he can do it, we can do it too. Even though we have so many distractions and so many things that, we've got the echoes of so many previous activities in our mind and body, all this karma, but bhakti is more than powerful enough to purify all of that. So we'll stop there. We heard about what it means to be an unadulterated devotee, spontaneous devotional service, to be spontaneously attracted to Krishna, um, what it feels like to be free of passion and ignorance, and then um, continuing that devotional service so that there's spontaneous love for Krishna and leaning into our daily practice so that we can actually not just feel free from suffering, but becomes positively attracted to Krishna and return to our original position. Tat Sat. Now we'll take any comments or questions or reflections. Reflection means anything that stood out. See, you've all been taking notes, which is great. So now we get to hear those notes.
I really like because it's like a reminder also when you said transcendental knowledge enters the body, we still have much more to go. So it's just reminding us like it doesn't just stop there. There's like so much more for the rest of our lifetime to do so and tap
Yeah,
into.
absolutely. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And we get a lot up front. I mean, the first time you're in kirtan, take prasad, the first time you're around devotees, like, wow, this is cool. And then the first week and the first year, and it's great. And it it's a very generous process. And it's also not like it's not like a material process where there's diminishing returns. Been practicing for over a decade, and it 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 really is, you get what you give. And Krishna is a person, which means he knows if you have all day to hear and chant, and you only hear and chant for 2 hours, you get a certain amount. But if you give as much as you can, you get more. And if you only had like half an hour all day to really give your heart and soul, and you give that, you also get like a lot, because Krishna knows how much you could possibly give and how much you choose to give of what you had. It's not just like what you give, it's what you're hiding behind your back, what you're holding on to for yourself. So there's always room for sincerity and growth. And that's like my consistent experience. That's the experience of devotees. So it's like it's not a wow, that was nice once upon a time. Now it's just a drudgery. No, bhakti, it Krishna wants to give us things that make liberation from suffering look insignificant. We'll learn about this in Nectar of Devotion. Liberation from suffering is a very early stage of bhakti, actually. It's not that much of an advanced stage to be like freed from the sufferings of the world, and to be like able to not have that bother you so much. That's an early gift. It's called klesha kne, the destruction of klesha, suffering in the world, material suffering. It's one of the first two things we get in bhakti. If you want to know more, you can tune into our um, soon to start Nectar Devotion class 2 Tuesdays from now. And yeah, so there's this encouragement to stay with it and remember what our goal is. Narada Muni is telling Vyasadeva, because Narada Muni is absolutely positively head over heels in love with Krishna. His whole existence is traveling up and down the cosmos, singing about Krishna and sharing him. Um, and he knows that we're all capable of that, and he needs Vyasadeva to remember that, so Vyasadeva can remind us that we're all capable of that. Because Vyasadeva was lost in the rules and regulations and rituals and modes of nature, and how do I make a bridge to help people come to Krishna? But he'd forgotten like the whole point of the bridge. A bridge is only a bridge if it gets you somewhere. Otherwise, it's just a pier. If it stops in the middle of the ocean, it's like splash. That was fun. Nice little walk I had once upon a time. Now I'm done. I'm in the water. You got to get to the goal. The goal is love of God. The goal is love of God. Everything else is just a signpost on the way. Helpful, even wonderful. But love of God is absolutely what we're made for.
Um, I'm appreciating how you were speaking about how our real nature is that we are devotees,
Hmm.
and that we see Krishna act accordingly, so that we actually have that pure devotional service, that nectar, as you said, or like that honey in a jar, that nectar in a jar. And it's not that we have to create that; it's we just have to uncover that, right? We're
Yeah.
just trying to get rid of the mixed devotional service to come home to our true nature of that pure devotional service. And that by leaning into hearing and chanting and spending time with unadulterated devotees, right, that we that process is happening, right, that process happens. And so even when we don't want to, it is to lean into hearing and chanting, to because that's present a lot, I think, in our modern time, in our society. It's like, well, whatever I feel called to do, or what I feels aligned, and like, yes, don't do things that are not aligned with what feels like truth for you. However, like, there's a process here that you are going to wake up and sometimes not want to do it, but you still do
Yeah.
it.
Just ask you know, the Olympic athletes who came back. Do they all feel like,
Train. Yeah.
training? I used to run the 400 meter. Just 1 year in high school. I wasn't very good. I ran the 400 and the 800. It's funny because the 400 meter is like, it's too long to be over right away, and it's too short to like do anything but sprint, like not sprint, but like run as hard as you can practically. So the last 150 meters of the 400 are basically a process of your entire body being on fire every single time. And runners, like, they talk about this. It's the most awful, you know, it's one of the most awful distances because it always just hurts so much. and you have to keep going as hard as you can. And whether or not you finish with an Olympic gold medal or you're the worst, I had like the second worst time or something, because I didn't start running till like my senior year of high school. I was running against these kids who were all like running from the time they were 6 years old. I got trashed. But it doesn't matter. One way or another, it hurts. But I'm glad I did it. It gave me some things that I couldn't have gotten otherwise. And so even materially, if you don't do things that get you out of the comfort zone, your life is gonna suck. It's gonna be terrible. It's gonna be such a disgrace and such a waste. You'll never do anything amazing, even materially. So both things are true. Like, we're actually essentially just coming in touch with what we're really about. We're really just devotees, so it is natural, and you don't figure that out on your own. It's not an intellectual adjustment. You can't like um you can't just like do things at your convenience and like roll over into pure devotional service. You need that mood of, I need this, and of reception and sincerity, and taking in from persons who are already there, or more advanced than you at least. So both things are true. And that's why it takes time, because there's only so much you can push the mind, you know? You can't be like, yeah, so I need you to chant like for 12 hours in a row today, and then again tomorrow, and for the next 3 years, every day. There's a process of like running the experiment. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, so I tried to do what they told me, and there's something in this. And then you keep doing it, but you do a little more, qualitatively or quantitatively or both, until you're like, you're not just crawling, you're like kind of walking and toddling, and then you're walking, then you're running, then you're sprinting, and then next thing you know, you got yourself an Olympic gold medal. So it's better than that, because no one is actually made for running the 400 meters. It's not actually their essential nature. They may have a body for it, like Michael Phelps has a body for swimming. There's no doubt about it, but the soul isn't made for any material activity. We actually are made for bhakti, but there's a way in which, you know, depending on how much you're willing to trust and how many chances you're willing to take in surrendering to higher authority, there's a certain amount of time it takes to come up to really what Narada Muni experienced. So yeah, both things are true. We have to know that this is what our heart is called towards, but also that our heart is covered right now. You know, that's why we're called to all these other things that are not good for us, and we have to be honest about that. I'm called to things that are not helpful. Otherwise, like whatever any inclination we have as a default setting, we should just experience. It's like, oh, that's my nature. I guess I'm just like in love with ice cream, you know. So that's absurd.
Right. Right. And then one other thing I love when you were sharing about Prabhupada, and I've heard a few times that Prabhupada would say when it was time for him to go to sleep, he said, okay, now I'm going to waste time.
Yeah.
And not that sleep is not important, but like he knew that he needed to sleep at least very much less than most of us. However, he knew he needed to do it for his health, right? But he knew that ultimately it was keeping him from his service and being able to, give us what he was giving us. But that even
Yeah.
when he woke up, like he was clearly in that state with Krishna even while sleeping, because as soon as he woke up, his lips would move again, right?
Yeah, I mean, Srila Prabhupada had an incredibly intense service. He had a handful of years to create, establish, and nourish a worldwide association of devotees, with the literature to back up, that association to really thrive at a pure level. That's unbelievable. So that means like every day he was shot out of a cannon, every single day. So we're not asked to do that, right? But even just getting yourself back to Godhead means leaning in to your hearing and chanting every day. It also means getting enough sleep, because too much sleep is also a problem, but not enough sleep is also a problem. Krishna says so in the 6th chapter. And as a former monk, I can tell you, like, you can only cut out the necessities of your body and mind so much before you pay a price of your health, and you pay a price where you're like falling asleep in your japa, and it's like that doesn't make you a pure devotee. It just makes you unbalanced.
Thank you.
Any other reflections or comments or questions? Anything that stood out? Okay, Jai. Well, let's lean into our hearing and chanting, however long we have the privilege today and this week, and try to remember Narada Muni's encouraging instruction and his own example. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Premanande, Hare Bol. Have a great day.